welcome to another historical fiction author chat. Today, I'm very excited to introduce you to Louise Fein. Hello, Louise.
Hi, lovely to be here.
I'm so happy that I could meet up with you, and you're off in Greece right now.
I am. I'm on a very short week's break, which is the first one in sort of 18 months. So it's lovely to be here.
Lucky you. Well, I'm glad I was able to grab you in time. And I want to introduce everybody to your new book, The Hidden Child, which came out in Canada October 19th. Oh, look at that. And it's such a pretty cover, too. I love that. I love the colors of it. So I'm looking forward to reading that book. It sounds right up my alley. So I'm going to read your little bio, and then I will read the synopsis. And for anybody watching and who watches me normally and thinks, what is wrong with Genevieve? She looks really weird. I got a filling today and I'm a little bit frozen. So that's why I look silly. I haven't, so you can laugh at me all you want. Anyway, I will get going on this. Louise Fein is the author of Daughter of the Reich, which has been published in 13 territories, and she holds an MA in creative writing from St. Mary's University. She lives in Surrey, UK with her family, and The Hidden Child is her second novel. And here's the synopsis for The Hidden Child. Eleanor Hamilton is happily married and charming mother to a 4-year-old girl, Mabel. I said that all wrong. Mother to a charming 4-year-old girl, Mabel. Her wealthy husband, Edward, a celebrated war hero, is a leading light in the burgeoning eugenics movement, the very ideology that will soon be embraced by Hitler. And it's increasingly important in designing education policy for Great Britain. But when Mabel develops debilitating epileptic seizures, Eleanor's world fractures. Mabel's shameful illness must be hidden, or Edward's life work will be in jeopardy and the family's honor will be shattered. When Eleanor discovers Edward has been keeping secrets, she calls into question everything she believed about genetic inferiority, and her previous unshakable faith in her husband disintegrates. Alarmed, distressed, and no longer able to bear the family's burden, she takes matters into her own hands. Inspired by the author's personal experience, The Hidden Child illuminates the moral and ethical issues of an era shaped by xenophobia, prejudice, fear, and well-intentioned yet flawed science. Vividly rendered, deeply affecting, and impeccably researched, Louise Fein's new historical novel is a sweeping story and a richly drawn portrait of a family torn apart by shame, deceit, and dangerous ideals. I'm looking forward to reading that one. That sounds very intriguing. So now, Louise, I will turn this screen over to you. I will disappear and I will be back later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm going to read you 2 parts. First, I'm going to read you, I've got an unusual character in this book, which is epilepsy itself. Epilepsy comes in very short chapters, and the reason why it's there you will hear about later. But for now, I'm just going to read this to you, and then I'm going to read most of chapter 1 as well, but I'm slightly cutting and pasting here, so bear with me. Allow me to introduce myself, or perhaps we've already met. It's quite possible. Diseases like me are hard to avoid. I hide away in the shadows until one day it begins. Feather touch, light as the brush of a moth's wing or the faintest breath of a newborn. Then, gaining strength like the unfurling of a leaf, I take shape. An unwanted guest, crawling through the dark recesses of a loved one's mind. At first, I'm dismissed as something other. For me, the subterfuge is all part of the game. Can you see me? Here I am, behind that blank stare, beneath the slack cheek, the relaxed button lips that allow a trail of saliva to ease its way out. Finally, the realization hits, and you know it's me, epilepsy. Then comes your frown, the purse of lips, tilt of head, the horror of it all. A hand of sympathy from a loved one on your arm, a pat that says 1,000 sorry words, the shrinking and shriveling, the must stay away in case it's catching, the shame and then the hiding. After that, Whatever harm I do, you do far worse. Oh yes, you humans think yourselves above the animals with your clever brains and fancy morals, but really, it's your inhumanity that sets you apart. I understand what drives you. No single creature knows you better than I, for we go together, we two, however hard you try to order the world and rid it of me, hand in reluctant hand, from Dostoevsky to Gershwin, Caesar to Joan of Arc, to Vincent van Gogh. Unknown to kings and the sons of kings, there's no rhyme or reason, no pattern to comfort you, rich or poor, young or old, genius or simpleton. I care not. They are all mine for the taking. So, what am I, this creature of the mind you so dread? I am anti-order. I am chaos. I disrupt and disturb. I'm the power of deception, a noise not there, a strange flavour on the tongue, a vivid pulse of light, the smell of hellfire, a kaleidoscope of colour. I'm an apparition, a clarity and a dissolution. You'll see me in the twitch of a hand, the fall of a chin, a darkness behind the pupils, the twist of a mouth, the jerk of a limb, the crack of a head, the falling. I'm right there behind those blank dead eyes, that slack expression. I am the stuff of nightmares, the destroyer of memory. I'm inspiration and hallucination, creation and destruction. For when my power is unleashed, your ordered world unravels. But one thing, my friend, is certain. Whatever mischief I may make, it's nothing to the folly of your meddling. Come, let me show you where your arrogance and foolhardy can lead. So that is from the point of epilepsy. And I'm now going to read you the first chapter from the point of view of Eleanor, who is the mother of Mabel, who is the little girl who suffers from epilepsy. Mabel grips Eleanor's arm tightly as they bowl fast down the country lane, Dilly's hooves kicking dust into the sultry July air. Limbs of the trees that stand like sentries beside the lane, reach out and curl above them, joining like the high arches of a cathedral to form a cool green canopy shading the little pony and trap and its occupants from the fierce heat of the afternoon sun. Faster, Mabel giggles, glancing up at her mother with sparkling eyes. Make Dilly go faster. She turns back to look at the road, laughing with glee as the wind lifts her curls, almost translucent where the sunlight catches them, her little bottom bouncing with excitement on the seat beside her mother. Eleanor steadies the reins in her hands. There's a creak of leather and the faint pang of equine sweat. The pony is trotting quite fast enough for this heat. Besides, they are plenty early enough to meet the 4:25 from London. Dilly can't go any faster, Mabel, Eleanor answers. It's too hot, and besides, she's quite old now, so it wouldn't be fair. Dilly's chestnut sides are darkening with sweat, but she maintains her fast pace, pulling eagerly against Eleanor's hands, ears pricked, head raised, as though she is as elated as Eleanor at the thought of her sister Rose coming home. Happiness swells as Eleanor thinks of Rose's reaction when she shares her news even Edward doesn't know yet. Mabel pouts and drops Eleanor's arm. How old is Dilly? Around 13, I believe. Is that old? Middle-aged for a pony, I should think. How old are you, Mamma? Eleanor laughs. You should never ask a lady her age, Mabel. She leans down and kisses the top of her daughter's head. But as it's you, I'll tell, as long as you keep it a secret between us, she says, tapping the side of her nose, keeping her expression stern. Mabel nods, her face solemn. I'm 27, actually, almost 28, she adds in surprise. How did she get to be so old? She was 20 only last year, or so it feels. And why does 28 sound so much older than 27? 30 is just around the corner, she realises with a sinking feeling. Is 30 old for a woman? A man of that age is considered to be just entering his prime of life, but a woman... Beside her, Mabel lets out a little gasp. That's so old. Will you die soon like Patch? You won't die, will you, Mamma? Goodness me, no. People live much longer than dogs and ponies, darling. I'm really very, very young for a person, she adds. Mabel looks relieved. Is Aunt Rose 27 too? Aunt Rose is only 18, soon to be 19, Eleanor says. And now that she is suitably educated, well-travelled, and polished into a smart young lady, Papa is rather keen to find her a nice, rich husband. She bites her lip. Too much. But things tend to be regurgitated by her daughter, usually to the wrong person. She glances down at Mabel's countenance. She seems firmly focused on the road ahead. The little girl is completely still, presumably contemplating whatever age-related questions that go on in a 4-year-old's mind. She looks pretty as a picture in her Sunday best cream dress, decorated all over with tiny yellow and pink flowers. Eleanor had agreed with Mabel earlier that it was just the thing to wear to greet Aunt Rose at the station. Mabel shifts and looks up at Eleanor. There's a darkness in the little girl's eyes. She's noticed this a few times before, so imperceptible she wonders if it's her imagination. In a flash, it's gone, and Mabel's face lights up. Can we sing a song? She asks, smiling. Good idea, Eleanor nods. What shall we sing, Mamma? Let's see. Eleanor takes a deep breath, and along to the rhythm of Dilly's clip-clop on the lane, she begins to swing and sway, Mabel quickly joining in with the swaying and the chorus. The trees peter out, and the lane runs beside a field. A group of slow-moving, shaggy, belted Galloway cows and calves graze close to the ditch at the side of the road, tails flapping at their round, hairy sides, the long grass sweeping their low-slung, white-striped bodies, heads lowered as though it's too hot to hold them high. Swarms of gnats hang in the air, and Eleanor swipes at them as they pass through. Up ahead, the lane shimmers in the afternoon heat haze. Eleanor glimpses the distant church steeple through the treetops beyond the field. Almost there, she tells Mabel, who is still singing to herself the same words over and over, with little pauses now and then before she starts again. They round the corner at the end of the field, and the station comes into view, with the White Hart public house opposite. And over the brow of the hill and out of sight lies the village of Mayfield, quintessentially English, with its picturesque village green, complete with cricket-pitched duck pond and maypole. Its timber-framed historic houses, some dating back to Tudor times, are arranged in an undulating hug around the green, the whole village nestled close within the beauty of the Surrey Hills. Eleanor twitches the reins backwards, and the ever-obedient Dilly slows to a walk. They are a good 10 minutes early. Whoa, Eleanor calls, and the pony and trap lurch to a halt. She steps down from the trap, keeping hold of the reins, and guides Dilly to the water trough outside the pub, where she takes a long drink, sucking the water noisily through the metal bit in her mouth. The pony rubs her head against Eleanor's shoulder, almost knocking her off balance. Eleanor lifts Mabel down from the trap so she can stretch her legs in the lane. While they wait for the train to arrive, she watches the little girl as she wanders, examining a beetle here, picking up a coloured stone there, all the time chattering to herself. Once or twice she stops mid-chatter and is completely still. It's as though she has remembered something, stopping her mid-flow. Then, a second or so later, she continues on her way. Afternoon, Mrs. Hamilton, Ted, the postman, calls from across the lane. He gives her a wave as he pushes his bike towards the postbox outside the station. Hot one today, he adds, pulling his keys from his pocket. Eleanor watches him idly, her mind drifting in delicious anticipation of her sister's homecoming. How she has missed her. Rose is all Eleanor has left of her childhood, and the impulse to keep her close and safe is almost unbearable. Perhaps because their two brothers failed to return from the war, and following the tragic death of both her parents, Eleanor is naturally fearful to let her sister out of her sight. It took a supreme effort of selflessness to allow her to go off to Paris for so long. Until Edward, it was just the two of them against the world. Edward really is so good to Rose. Darling Edward, what a burden they have been to him. When he married her, he took on far more than just a wife. It's right that Rose should find a husband soon and relieve Edward of the responsibility of 2 women to take care of, especially with a growing family. Eleanor's first encounter with Edward is seared deep into her mind. The clarity of the memory takes her breath away, just as he did when she first set eyes on him 8 years ago in 1920. The broad shoulders beneath the sharp cut of his uniform, the medals lining his chest. A quick glance and she had recognized the military cross, awarded for exemplary gallantry during enemy operations. From behind her typewriter, she had wondered, as he folded his tall frame into a chair outside the Brigadier General's room in the War Office, just what acts of bravery he had undertaken. Those haunting eyes had fixed on hers just a little longer than strictly appropriate for a captain waiting for his decommissioning appointment. He remembers the effect he had on her, the hot fluttering in her chest and how the words she was typing melted and swam on the page in front of her. She could still feel the soft spring breeze from the open window touch her skin, hear the grind of traffic rumbling along Horse Guards Avenue below, and sense the press of his eyes on her flushed cheeks as she tried fruitlessly to concentrate on her work. From the corner of her eye, she watched him take a pen and notebook from his top pocket and, forehead wrinkled in thought, begin to write. She'd wondered if he was a poet or perhaps planning his words for the Brigadier. When Edward had disappeared from behind the Brigadier General's closed door, Eleanor became aware of the strong thrum of her heart, the prickle of sweat on her skin, the rasp of her breath in her throat. The knowledge that he would walk back out at some point had her patting her hair, smoothing her blouse, pinching her cheeks. It felt like hours before he reappeared. It was ridiculous, she knew. She was just a young, ordinary girl, a secretary. He, a military man, a much older man. He must be, 30, 35 even? She only 19, and pretty much destitute now that she and Rose were alone together in the world. Someone so smart and self-assured, so brave and handsome, he would never be interested in her. But when he did reappear, he turned and shook the Brigadier General by the hand. Best of luck with it all, the Brigadier General had said, pumping Edward's hand so vigorously his moustache had wobbled. A temporary gentleman, Eleanor surmised, a man given a temporary commission to serve as an officer in the war, now released to return to his former profession. Back to what, she had wondered, unable to resist staring at him as he prepared to leave the room. Before replacing his cap, he turned and smiled, a warm, wonderful smile that lit up his face. Passing her desk on his way to the door, he slipped a folded note next to her typewriter, unnoticed by the Brigadier General, whose mind was undoubtedly on hundreds more men he had to decommission in the coming days. I'll be at the Café Brew, corner of Whitehall Place at 6 p.m. this evening, if you would care to join me for a cup of tea. Be reassured that my invitation is purely professional. Yours, Edward Hamilton, the note had read, which set Eleanor's heart racing all over again. There's a jangle of keys as Ted locks the postbox, the bulging sack resting in a basket on his handlebars. He turns towards Eleanor, touching his cap as though to say goodbye, but instead, his vision darts over her shoulder and he lets out a yell. His hands leave the handlebars, the bike crashes into the ground, mail pouring from the sack. Eyes stretched wide, mouth agape, he is pointing at something beneath a tree. Eleanor turns in confusion. Mabel. Sticks scattered, she's sitting on the dusty ground, face twisted, her eyes weirdly rolling back. Her chin drops to her chest, once, twice, hands twitching. Eleanor's feet are rooted to the ground in horror. Her daughter looks as though she's been possessed. Her normal, sweet expression vanished under the contorted features of her face. Ted moves first, walking slowly, hands extended. What's the matter with her, he says. What's happening? His words snap her into action and Eleanor runs to her. Mabel? She takes her in her arms. The little girl doesn't respond. Mabel, Eleanor cries. What's wrong with her? It's as though she's not there, a strange creature inhabiting her daughter's body in her absence. There's a roar in Eleanor's head. Panic closes her throat and she slaps Mabel's face hard, anything to rid her of the hellish grimace, the otherworldly look in her eyes. Shall I fetch the doctor? Ted's voice. His hand is on her shoulder, and then suddenly she's back, her daughter. Mabel's face returns to its usual self. Her eyes focus on Eleanor's and they fill with cloudy confusion. Eleanor's heart is beating hard, her breath shallow. The ground shudders beneath her feet. It's okay, she whispers into Eleanor's ear. It's okay. Mabel's ear. It's okay. She sweeps the dust from her hair, her dress. Mrs. Hamilton, Eleanor looks up into Ted's worried face. I said, shall I get the doctor? Eleanor looks back at her daughter, who has now popped her thumb in her mouth and is sucking hard on it. No, she says, without any real conscious thought as to why not. Ted is motionless. She's quite all right now, she says. I don't know what happened. Cooey, Eleanor! Rose. Eleanor staggers shakily to her feet and turns to see her younger sister, a wide smile beneath her floppy-brimmed straw hat, rosy-cheeked and beautiful, striding towards them up the slope from the station, a vision of perfection, carrying her case in one hand, waving with the other. Mabel shifts in her arms and points at Rose. Eleanor turns back to Ted. Really, Mabel is fine. She was late to bed last night and she's very tired. I'm sure that's what was. You know, children, I'm so sorry about all the letters. We'll help you pick them up. Not to worry, says Ted, as long as the little one's okay. He looks uncertain. Please, Eleanor says, don't worry. Mabel is completely fine. There's absolutely no need, she says a second time, for you to mention this to anyone. Ted nods, bends to right the bicycle, and cycles away. Rose is crossing the street, sprinting the last few yards. She drops the case and launches herself straight into Eleanor's arms. In a swirl of fine cotton and her sister's flowery scent and laughter, she is swallowed into Rose's embrace. Mabel squeezed between them. They pull apart as a whistle sounds from behind the station building. A cloud of steam rises and the sound of the train cranking and straining hard out of the station fills her ears. Mabel is too heavy and Eleanor puts her gently down. Oh, Rose, it's so good to see you. I didn't hear the train arrive. And you, dearest Eleanor. Now, how is my favourite niece? Rose gently pinches Mabel's cheeks and the little girl buries her head shyly in Eleanor's skirt. Goodness, how you've grown. She turns to Ted, who is picking up the scattered contents of his mailbag. What's happened? Can I help? It's quite all right, he says, crouching to refill the sack. I was being clumsy. Nice to see you back, Mrs. Carmichael. How long has it been? 9 whole months, Rose laughs. Can you believe it? Welcome home, says Ted, picking up the last of the letters. Eleanor holds her sister at arm's length. And how well you look, she says with a smile. Rose has filled out. She really does look the picture of health, her light blue eyes shining, her cheeks flushed. Edward will have no trouble securing her a suitable spouse. She reaches down for the case Rose had dropped during their embrace. Come on, let's get home, Eleanor says. I expect Mrs. Bellamy has made us all a nice Victoria sponge cake with strawberry jam inside, just for you and Rose, Mabel. The little girl licks her lips and rubs her belly. Yummy, she says, her earlier shyness melting away as fast as it arrived. I like strawberry jam. How normal she sounds, how ordinary. Is it possible, Eleanor wonders, that she just dreamt up that awful episode? I love strawberry jam too, Rose smiles at her niece. See, we're just the same, you and me. And Mabel curls her little fingers into Rose's gloved hand. It's so good to be back, Rose exclaims. As, seated in the trap, Eleanor turns Dilly to head home to Brook End, Mabel in the middle. It will be an adjustment, Eleanor says, to be back in quiet old England after your travels. Of course, but I've missed it. And you, dear Ellie. We've never been apart for more than a few weeks before, she smiles. Oh, and Paris is wonderful. It was so generous of Edward to let me go. And did it do the trick? Eleanor asked in mock seriousness. Have they turned you into a chic and fluent Parisian? Edward will want to see evidence of his investment. I shall let him be the judge, Rose laughs. Lily breaks into an eager trot. Eleanor glances at Rose's profile. She really does look radiant. Her months in Paris and the weeks traveling around Italy have clearly suited her. They fall into a companionable silence, lulled by the sound of Dilly's hooves, her smooth coat gleaming and dulling as she passes through patches of sunlight and lengthening shadows, the sun dipping lower into the sky.
Oh, very nice. Hang on, I will bring myself back here. Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think Rose has a little bit of a secret to share. I don't know, just a hunch there, looking radiant in the sunshine. So I have to ask you right off the bat, that intro was something like I've never heard before, and I loved it. I love the insight into the inside of epilepsy. So where did that come from? What prompted? It's a whole different way of thinking when you write like that. So what prompted that?
Yeah, so when I was writing this book, I tried to write from the point of view of Mabel, but she's very, very small. She's only 4 years old, and without giving too much away, she does go to an epilepsy colony for a while, which was very normal in those days. They would have sent very small children into institutions. And I wanted to give the reader a feeling for what it was like in one of these institutions, but I couldn't get Mabel's voice to work. And one day I just sat down and wrote this scene from the point of view of epilepsy, and it just flowed. It just worked really, really well. And I think it really came out of the fact that when my own daughter, when she was tiny, had a very severe form of epilepsy, and it was like she was overtaken by a monster when her seizures were there. And I wrote a poem at the time about this monster that had taken over my daughter. And it was really that voice that came out. My daughter is now a teenager and very healthy and fine. But I think that's really where it came from.
Oh, I love that. That's a really introspective. I've had that same experience where you try to write something and you just can't find the voice, and you turn it upside down and tell it from a different perspective. But I've never told it from the side of a disease, and I think that is brilliant. I think that's amazing.
Thank you.
And the fact that Mabel's illness is based on your daughter's is what a personal way to add to this. I've been I mentioned to you earlier that the theme in this, when I read about the synopsis talking about the eugenics program, and there's Mabel in the middle of all this, I've been watching 2 different programs that as soon as I read the synopsis, I went, whoa, I've just read about similar ideas. One was a CBC show called Camp X, which is great for Canadians if you're watching this. And the other is a Netflix show called The Man in the High Castle, also Nazi-based, but kind of dystopian. But it's they do approach the subject of eugenics and the Nazis and what happens when there's a little problem in the genes of a Nazi family member. And it's very, very interesting to do that. So I wanted to ask you, it says both this and your earlier novel, Daughter of the Reich, which 13 colonies, that's great. It published so widely like that, 13 territories. It's inspired by stories of your family's past. How does that work?
Yeah, so my father came to England in the early 1930s as a refugee from Nazi Germany. He was a German Jew. And he never talked of his experiences. So that's really where that book was inspired by, me wanting to find out what life would have been like for him. He died when I was only 17, so I never really got the chance to talk to him about that. Mm-hmm. And actually, this book, obviously, my own daughter was part of the inspiration. It's not a book about my daughter, but had she been born 100 years before, her outlook would have been very, very different. And it was kind of a combination of the 2 things, because when I was researching for Daughter of the Reich, I had always associated eugenics with Nazi Germany. And I'd been quite surprised to find that really all their ideas came from the UK and from the US, and actually all around the world, where eugenics was very, very widely accepted and had a lot of support from very famous people. Churchill was very much a eugenicist. Rockefeller funded a lot of the Nazi experimentation. There's a whole huge list of famous people who supported the movement. And I suppose it was really the combination of those two things that this book came out of. So
that's amazing. And I love when you can grab onto historical information that turns you upside down and I had no idea. That's fantastic. I didn't know about epileptic camps for children, or did you call them camps? What was the wording used?
Yeah, so they were called epilepsy colonies, a little bit like lepers colonies. And interestingly, today I'm in Crete. I went to see a leper colony, a former leper colony, I should say. It's a similar idea. The idea was that you would put people with epilepsy and other conditions into these institutions because they were not allowed to marry, they were not allowed to have children. So it was the whole idea behind eugenics was to try to breed that condition out of the human population. Of course, it's flawed science. It doesn't work. Epilepsy comes out of nowhere. Neither my husband nor I have any history of epilepsy in our family, and it just sometimes comes out. They don't really know, even today, what causes it. So, of course, it doesn't work. And hence the reason why I've got epilepsy as a character in the book who kind of talks directly to the reader and has this sort of, gives this overall sort of view on how humans and their sort of futile attempts to rid mankind of disease, and it just doesn't work. So, yeah. Yeah,
I caught that when you were saying that the monster was saying, you guys you don't have any idea what you're dealing with here. Basically, I'm in charge. It was very effective. So this is your second novel, is that right? And
that's right.
You're enjoying the author life? It's busy.
Yeah, I mean, I've been, incredibly lucky. Unfortunately, my first book came out, as we were also discussing earlier, in lockdown, which is not a great time to be debuting. But I've been really lucky that I've had lots of support from my publishers, and it's done really well. So yeah, I'm loving. It's something I've always dreamed of doing. So being able to write is amazing.
Congratulations on that. And I am looking forward very much to reading the book, and also Daughter of the Reich. I'm going to put in an order for those right away. I want to thank you very much for being on here with me today, and all the way from Greece. So if there were a couple of little glitches with the Wi-Fi, but I think it's still pretty amazing that we could bridge the gap between in Crete, where you are, and here in Halifax. So I think that's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to reading your books as well, which sound totally fascinating. So
thank you. Well, it's been wonderful meeting you, and all the best going forward.
Thank you so much.